Brilliant. So if I could just a couple of things about housekeeping, really. If you could please stay muted just when you're not kind of speaking, that would be really helpful. It just helps us not get that background noise. And if you could please, if you have a question, raise your hands using the sort of toolbar at the top. What we're going to do is Verity is going to give you an overview of the code, and then we'll move over to your pre-submitted questions, which some of you sent in beforehand. And then what we'll do is we'll move over. If you've got any questions, welcome to raise your hand or pop them in the chat, and we'll get to those after the pre-submitted ones. So thank you very much for joining us. And that's it from me now. So I'll hand over to you, Verity. Thank you very much.
Lovely, thank you very much, Anthea. So, hi everyone, my name is Verity Richards. I'm one of the heads of services here at the Housing Ombudsman. I have been working really closely with my colleagues and the sector, and have been responsible for developing the Statutory Complaint Handling Code and also our approach to monitoring compliance. So I'm going to take you on a bit of a... sorry, that was a bit noisy there. So I'll be taking you through a bit of background on the code and how we got to where we are today, and then we'll move on into the questions. I am joined this afternoon by some of the colleagues from my project team who will be here to answer those questions. There we go. So as I'm sure many of you in the room, if not all of you, will know, the code was originally published in 2020. It was developed by the Housing Ombudsman Service, working with landlords, with residents and also staff, to pull together the guidelines and set the standards to support local resolution of complaints in the landlord's own procedures. That is a really key aim of the code, to empower landlords to handle complaints really effectively, and to follow a really clear procedure to handle those complaints, but then also to support them to embed a positive complaint handling culture. And one of the huge benefits that we've seen as part of that is a real clarity for landlords following the code, but also for residents. They know what to expect from the process and how they can engage, and if necessary, that they can actually bring their complaint to the Ombudsman for investigation. In July 2023, that was when the Social Housing Regulation Act amended the Ombudsman's powers. There were several different powers and different parts of the Ombudsman's role, which was amended at that point. The main part of that was around the complaint handling code. So first of all, the code would be able to be issued as a statutory code of practice, and that is what we now call the complaint handling code. But in order for us to do that, we had to carry out a statutory consultation. We did that in the autumn time, and our statutory consultees, so people that we must consult with in order to issue the code, it's the regulator of social housing, member landlords, and also residents as users of the service. At the point that the code is issued, the Social Housing Regulation Act then places a duty on the Ombudsman to monitor compliance with the code. So landlords must comply and the Ombudsman must monitor that compliance. So as I mentioned, we did our consultation in September. We opened our consultation, in September of 2023. Myself and my team, we spoke to over 1,000 individuals. That was through a wide variety of engagement activities. We did webinars, for example, through the CIH, through TPAS. We also attended in-person events, and we held meetings with landlords, but also with residents. So that included our resident panel. We also met with different landlord forums, etc., to really make sure that there was awareness of the consultation. We could answer any of those key questions. We received over 600 formal responses. Half of them, just over half, were from residents, but we did receive lots from landlords, and we also received a number of responses from key stakeholders, so including trade bodies. So, for example, the National Federation of Housing, National Housing Federation. We also had the Abbeyfields Society, we had TPAS, we had different organisations. All of those have been reviewed, and as you can see there, over 1,400 comments, all of which we really carefully considered. It was a huge amount of feedback. Overall, there was a support for the code, the provisions, and the approach to monitoring compliance. We did recognise that there were lots of queries about further guidance and further information to support that work, which we've listened to. From residents, the really key themes that came across were the challenges about making complaints and having those heard and recognised, particularly when raising repeat concerns, and how those were being taken forward. Challenges around delays. Delays to receiving responses, delays to ensuring that actions have been taken and that those are being taken forward. And then in terms of the approach to monitoring compliance, real sense of the need for independent review. So recognising that whilst landlords already in the majority of cases are publishing information, a sense of an independent review and consideration being needed. I'm sure it won't surprise any of you in the room that key themes from landlords were really about support for the code and a desire to deliver a really effective complaint handling service. But the challenges around volumes, resource and capacity to actually deliver all of the different provisions of the code, particularly around timescales, whilst making sure that that service delivered is still a quality service. So good quality engagement, good quality letters, etc. That was a real set of feedback from landlords. As I've already said, lots of queries asking for more guidance and more support. So that's why we've been putting on these webinars. We intend to continue running webinars, potentially covering different elements of the code, but also complaint handling. We will continuously ask for feedback and develop our offering. We've also published a significant amount of guidance and intend to continue to do so. We received loads of suggestions, ideas and recommendations, which was really, really valuable. We had some really fantastic examples of how landlords have been embedding service improvements to their work, how they are engaging with residents as part of their scrutiny and their oversight. And we will very much be continuing to reflect on that and to share that across the sector. The other area that we really recognised through the consultation was the difference in operating models and also the different types of services being provided across our membership. Those people that took part in the consultation may remember that we had originally intended to do a joint complaint handling code with the local government and social care ombudsman. And it was through the feedback from landlords, social landlords, housing associations, but also councils, which really demonstrated the need to have a separate approach, so one code but for each organisation, but really closely aligned because the principles were well supported. We have set out all of the details of our consultation, including respondents and our reasons for taking forward different proposals, and they are in our consultation response document. That is on our website, and we will be sharing these slides, so you will be able to access them. You can see there that the link is there. So the outcome of the consultation is that we issued the Statutory Complaint Handling Code. That was published on the 8th of February, and it applies to all members of the Housing Ombudsman Scheme. So all members, all including local authorities, large housing associations, small housing associations, all members are required to comply with the code. And as I've already mentioned, you will notice that that is aligned with the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman, but it is different. We've also published alongside the code the self-assessment, which is against the code. That is what we expect and require landlords to be completing to demonstrate that they comply with the different provisions of the code. We issued our frequently asked questions, which pulled from a lot of the feedback from the consultation, asking for more information, more guidance, more information about how we would expect the code to be used. We will be continuously reviewing and refreshing those frequently asked questions. This webinar today is the last of a series, and we are in the process of reviewing and updating those so that they are current and they reflect the feedback and comments that the sector has, and residents as well. We've published our equality impact assessment of the code, setting out how we would see the code affecting different groups of people. That is there for openness and transparency. We are encouraging landlords to look at that as a way of looking at how they might view their own equality impact assessments of their various policies and procedures. We have also published our code compliance framework. That is the framework which sets out how the Ombudsman intends to monitor compliance with the code. It sets out the key submission timescales, and then also what we will be assessing through our work. Alongside that, we have revised our complaint handling .
Looks like Verity might have a few connection problems.
Apologies.
You're back, Verity. You're back. No problem. You're back. I think we may have lost Verity again. Just checking. Just give it a few moments to see if she is able to get back to us. There we go. I think, Verity, you might be back again. Brilliant.
Fantastic.
Fantastic. There you are.
There we go. So apologies. I think I'd got to complaint handling failure orders. So apologies for that. So we've reissued our complaint handling failure order guidance. There are now 2 sets of guidance related to complaint handling failure orders. So firstly, our casework related complaint handling failure orders for individual cases, but then also our type 3 complaint handling failure orders, which will be what is issued if we were to find non-compliance with the code. Moving on, so highlighting the key changes to the code. Those of you that have already accessed our website, we do have a designated web page, and we have created an easy reference guide which will allow you to see the code as of 2022, and then also the most recent one, so you can see those changes. The key points of difference are that the processes, so all procedures or complaints policies, must only have 2 stages. That includes any third-party arrangements. So if you have a managing agent or a contractor that handles a particular stage or both stages of the complaints process, that must be the must form one or both of those 2 stages of the complaints process. Timescales and requirements for acknowledging complaints at each stage. So we have updated our code so that when a complaint is received, organisations, so landlords, have 5 working days to acknowledge that complaint and set out their understanding of the complaint, and anything that the landlord isn't responsible for, also doing that at the same time. So that's 5 working days. And then at stage 2, also 5 working days for a complaint to be escalated. So that is a point of difference. We've also set the timescales for responding to complaints at each stage. So at stage 1, a landlord has 5 working days to acknowledge the complaint, and then 10 working days from the point of acknowledgement to provide that stage 1 response. In where necessary, should be in minimal circumstances, an extension can be applied, and that can be up to 10 working days at stage 1. If there is a need to go beyond that, and for that extension to go beyond, we would expect those to be in exceptional circumstances. So, for example, where there has been business continuity planning invoked, or where there is a specific incident such as a cyber attack, that would be the level of exceptional circumstances. And then at stage 2, landlords have 5 working days to accept the escalation of the complaint, and after that 20 working days to provide a response, with the option to extend by an additional 20 working days through that process. And again, if there are additional extensions required, we would expect those to be in exceptional circumstances, and for the resident to be informed of what those circumstances are, when a response will be received, and also for them to receive a referral to the Housing Ombudsman at any point for those extensions. We've also updated the exclusions part of the code. So one of the main changes is that complaints should be or must be accepted by a landlord for up to 12 months. It was previously 6 months, but it's now been extended to 12 months. We have made that change through feedback and also findings from our own casework. So finding that actually complaints can be very entrenched and go on for quite some time, and to get to the root of those needing that extension time. But then also around escalating complaints. So one of the key changes is around requiring residents to give their reason for being dissatisfied. We felt that the feedback was really that was a key barrier for residents, particularly where communication was a challenge. They might not be able to articulate why they're unhappy, but for landlords to escalate that complaint, ask for clarification, and then provide a response based on the information that they have and that they know at that point. Benefits to residents because they can move their complaint forward, but also for landlords so that you're not being stuck in a bit of a backwards and forwards trying to understand that reason can be taken forwards. We've clarified requirements on resourcing, so ensuring that complaints teams or individuals are adequately resourced and supported to be able to be empowered to provide those responses and that quality service that they will be aiming to do so, and also set out the requirement for a member responsible for complaints, which is an executive, a member of the executive team who usually sits on the governing body, or should sit on the governing body, to be responsible for embedding that positive culture and assuring the board that quality complaint handling is being delivered. The last is a requirement to produce and publish an annual report that sets out complaints performance, but also the service improvements being made as a result of complaints. That's to increase transparency and accountability to residents, which was a really key piece of feedback, and wanting that reassurance that that is being learnt from and that things are being taken forward. In terms of monitoring compliance, so as I've already mentioned, the code was applied from the 1st of April, which was actually a bank holiday, but so applied from the 1st of April, and the Housing Ombudsman also took effect from the same date. Our code compliance framework sets out much more detail about our approach, but there are 3 ways that we will be monitoring compliance. So compliance and oversight and scrutiny, that is the completion of the self-assessment, the publication of the service improvement, the complaint handling and service improvement report, and the other requirements, they're set out in section 8 and 9 of the Complaint Handling Code. We'll also be looking at compliance in policy, so ensuring that policies are compliant with the code, and where there are any instances that a landlord is unable to comply with a specific part of the code. So, for example, some very small organisations may not have a website. We wouldn't expect them to have a website just purely because of the requirements of the code, but we would expect them to be able to explain how they have met that intention. So, are they providing a copy to all of their residents? Have they put it on a notice board if they have one block, for example? And we will consider each of those points of non-compliance to identify whether they are accepted or whether action needs to be taken. We'll also be looking at compliance in practice. If a policy is compliant, then obviously that's fantastic, but it's delivery on the ground. So are the principles of the policy being applied? Are they being applied consistently? And if not, why not? And what action needs to be taken to be fully compliant with the code? Be engaging with landlords, giving them the opportunity to resolve any of those issues, and we will be supporting landlords to do so. We recognise that it's not easy for any organisation to be compliant all of the time, but we will be there to support organisations to do so. If there is any evidence of non-action or non-compliance, we may issue a complaint handling failure order. They will all be published. We already publish our complaint handling failure orders each quarter. They are also reported to the regulator, and you may have seen that the organisations with repeat complaint handling failures, they've also received individual letters from Richard Blakeway as the Ombudsman. We may also publish individual orders. So for those of you that have seen our severe maladministration publications, we may publish in a similar vein, so highlighting the failures and challenges by a particular landlord and any lessons learned. In terms of support for landlords, so as I've said, we are looking to support landlords. We recognise that there is a desire. I don't think anyone would be in housing if they didn't want to do a really good job and do a good service and make a difference. Our key documents are being published on have been published on the website. We're continuing to enhance the offering. We have our guidance for self-assessments, which we're aiming to publish next week. We also have guidance on submissions, so how to submit the information to the Ombudsman as part of the annual information. We are finalising our e-learning, so we will have a e-learning module covering the key parts of the code and also how that applies. And we are also developing microlearns. So our microlearn modules, they focus on different key aspects of the code. So, for example, accessibility and awareness, exclusions, they will all have their own microlearns, which are between 5 and 15 minutes, really sort of to bring that code to life and to answer those questions. We still have our frequently asked questions, which we'll be continuing to review and update. And we have our webinars, which obviously you know about because you are here. We have our dedicated email, which you can see here, so compliance@housing-ombudsman.org.uk. We have a team that is answering those at the moment, and we will continue to do so. We will aim to respond within 5 working days, but if we do need an extension or it's a more complicated technical query, we will let you know, and then we'll be able to provide those responses to you. We now have our time for questions, and as Anthea said at the start, we're going to start and sort of focus on our pre-submitted questions, but once we've gone through those, we'd be more than happy to answer any of those questions in the meeting where we can. Can't promise to answer everything, but if we don't, then please do put it in the chat and we will make sure that we get around to everybody. And we'll provide an update via email. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I think I might still be spotlighted, I think, Anthea.
Well, yes, I'll just spotlight the rest of the team as well.
Superb, thank you. So
we've got a couple of pre-submitted questions. I believe Kirsty's had to leave us.
yeah.
So the first question is from Julia Potter from CGHA. So we are a small housing association with 101 homes. Our financial year is October to September. So assume we have to submit checklist / compliance with code by December 2024 and publish on our website. We have voluntarily completed the checklist and reported to board annually on complaints and compliance. I assume, therefore, we just need to formalise what we have already been doing and make public, as well as sending the info to the Housing Ombudsman. Is that correct?
Yes, absolutely. So for those of you who perhaps haven't seen it, so landlords with less than 1,000 homes, we are requiring those to be submitted in line with the publication of the tenant satisfaction measures to try and minimise burdens for landlords and duplication. So it would be, we would expect them to be returned at the point that the TSMs are being published or within 12 weeks of your financial year end, whichever of those is soonest. When you are doing those reports and going through those, the new code does require the annual complaints performance and service improvement report. It goes onto the website, but also has the governing body's response. We have received quite a few queries about what does that report need to look like, what needs to be included, could we have a template? At this stage, we're not going to be providing templates or examples of that information. We recognise that landlords, you know your tenants, you know your residents, you know what is going to be meaningful for them. And we've got just under 1,800 landlords, all of different sizes, with different types of residents. So at this stage, we are asking landlords to provide that report, and we'll be using the work that we do to identify really successful approaches and sharing that best practice. The minimum requirements for publication in that report are set out in sections 8 and 9 of the code. So volumes of complaints, the types of complaints, how they've been handled, any information from the Housing Ombudsman. So if there has been a report, or if you have a landlord report, they're published every year. They are all on the in the code itself. So that is your checklist, but it's up to you. You may well want to put more information in there. And we are not being overly prescriptive, and we'll pull together good practice to do that. We do know that this is an area that lots of people have got questions on, so we are going to expand in our frequently asked questions to make sure that that's the case, that landlords have what they need. But if there is anything specific, please email our team and we'll get back to you.
Thanks, Verity. And the next question was from Helen Binks of Lumen Housing, and they've asked, what is the difference between a service request and early or local resolution? Is there a possibility that complaints will be overlooked if landlords use the early local resolution?
So again, this is a really, really commonly asked question, and we are intending to put together a key topic through our Centre for Learning about service requests, because we know it's something that landlords are really keen to have more information on. So a service request is a request or a report from a resident to ask a landlord to deliver a service. Sometimes it could be to put something right, but it's to deliver that service. So a service request would be a landlord that's responsible for repairs, a repairs request, a report of antisocial behaviour for the first time would be considered to be a service request, or a request for information. Those would be service requests. Sometimes residents will say that they are very unhappy, and they'll express dissatisfaction and say, oh, I'm very dissatisfied because I need to have that repair done. And it'd be for landlords to make that decision about, well, actually, this is the first time we would consider that to be a service request, explain that to the resident and offer them the opportunity to have a complaint if they are unhappy. That's the key point. It's making sure that residents do have that option to raise that complaint. In terms of the local resolution and early resolution, that absolutely is a potential risk that landlords don't raise a complaint, either that they ask for a complaint, they don't offer the opportunity, for a resident to have a complaint, but also that they, I don't want to say pressure, but they offer alternative approaches to resolving the situation when it actually should be recorded as a complaint. And if that is in agreement with the resident, then that would be absolutely fine, as long as the offer of a complaint has been made. But the resident choice really needs to take precedence. If we were to receive that complaint and do that investigation through, if it wasn't resolved, we may find maladministration because there has been a delay and a barrier to a resident making a complaint, particularly if the Ombudsman's had to investigate, but that would be dependent on those individual circumstances. I think that should answer that question.
So we've got a couple of questions as well in the chat. So I've got, the first one is, why was it moved down from 3 to 2 stages?
Yep, so one of the main reasons that 3 to 2 stages was that the overall time for a resident to receive that response and have the opportunity to have their complaint investigated is really by its nature extended, the more stages that a resident would have to go through those different stages. On balance, the feedback from the residents through our consultation was a real desire for complaints to be resolved swiftly and promptly and really effectively, and that was really found through the 2-stage process rather than the 3-stage process, which is why we've moved from 3 to 2. Get that one right. Definitely don't want to give you the wrong information there.
And then another question we've had in the chat is, how long does a complainant have to escalate a complaint to stage 2?
So the code itself isn't prescriptive about the amount of time that a resident would have between receiving their stage 1 response to escalating to a stage 2 response. I know that a lot of landlords have asked this question and have been looking to put a timescale in. We wouldn't be adverse to that timescale being put in as long as it was reasonable, but that also that any requests for escalating outside of that timescale where the individual circumstances were taken into account. So, for example, if a landlord said that a resident had 20 working days to escalate their complaints, as set out in their policy, but a resident came back to say, well, actually, I've been on holiday, or I've had a bereavement, or I've had personal circumstances which has prevented me from contacting you. We would expect landlords to take that into account when deciding if they were going to escalate or not. One thing that has come up a lot, less in the consultation, but more in our casework and feedback from landlords, is around residents, particularly at stage 1, wanting to wait for the actions to be completed. So say if you've agreed to do a repair as part of that stage 1 response, but then finding that it's going to be 28 days, quite a lot of landlords, it's 28 days for a routine repair, that would then put them outside of that escalation point. So just being mindful that each of those individual circumstances would need to be considered, but it would be up to landlords if they wanted to put that time in there.
Thanks, Verity. So another one is, as well as providing a copy of the self-assessment to the board, do we need to provide a copy to the Ombudsman?
Yes, please. All landlords, regardless of size and regardless of type, will be required to provide a submission. So the submissions form will be made available to all landlords. It will be published on our website, and landlords will be expected to provide that within their own submissions time. So for large landlords, that is in line with the times, so over 1,000 properties, apologies, is in line with their submissions to the Regulator of Social Housing. So we will be expecting all large landlords with more than 1,000 properties to provide their submission to us by the 30th of June. Small housing associations will be at the point that you publish your tenant satisfaction measures, or within 12 weeks of your year end. We know the majority of landlords will be using the March to April. So again, we would expect those to be likely coming in at the end of June this year. Similar timing to large landlords, but I'm aware of others who run a September to October, and a number of landlords who do a calendar year. So we would be expecting those to come in at different points during the year, and we'll assess compliance at that point.
Thanks, Verity. So another one we've had is from Helen from Inspire North. I've just wanted, if she's in the room, if she could just clarify, she's put as a supported housing landlord, how will, and then she's put HO, so I'm not sure if she means housing ombudsman or housing officer, deal with escalations that are not housing based, i.e. support staff. So apologies, Helen, if you're there, if you could just clarify, please.
Yeah, so we are a registered landlord with less than 1,000 properties, but we deal with a lot of complex mental health needs. We have quite chaotic clients, maybe clients coming out of a prison and probation society, and as such, a lot of their complaints don't necessarily relate to the housing, but obviously with the way that we do it at the moment, it's going to be going after stage 2. We did have a stage 2 where they could go to their chief executive or to a client voice tenant panel. Taking that away so it goes to housing ombudsman, how would they deal with it if someone was complaining about a member of staff's behaviour, because they might see it because you're the housing ombudsman, I complain to you, but actually isn't a landlord necessary situation? Is that something that you will be dealing with, or would they have to like?
So what we would say is that in those circumstances, to provide them with the housing ombudsman contact details, and we will make sure we would assess each of those individual cases against our jurisdiction, and then we would signpost that resident or that individual to the most appropriate organisation. So if I'm understanding correctly, and I was at a large landlord before and we had supported housing, so I feel you quite acutely there. So we would be very likely to be signposting them to the local government and social care ombudsman, and if absolutely necessary, we could then do a joint investigation, which we have done, because I'm sure we can all identify a lot of this is very closely interlinked with housing and support. So we work really closely with the local government and social care ombudsman, and we can do those investigations. So I would say do the referral to us, and we'll make sure that we're signposting those individuals as necessary. Ultimately, jurisdiction, so what we can investigate versus what we can't investigate, is actually surprisingly complicated. And actually, it's much better for us to be making that decision rather than yourselves. I'm sure no one would want to be a barrier to the right organisation. So I hope that helps, Helen. Superb. Like a thumbs up of a Thursday afternoon.
Okay, so if we've got time for some more, we've got how do we progress a complaint where we need information from the complainant in order to investigate, and they are withholding or delaying giving us the evidence needed. At what point do we review and decide the complaint outcome with the information we do have?
Yeah, so this was one of the things which came up through the consultation, interestingly from both sides, actually from residents and also landlords, about that point of if there is a lack of clarity between the complainant and the organisation, how can that be resolved? So what we would expect is that if a complaint is at stage 1, at the acknowledgement point, the landlord would be setting out the definition of the complaint. So their understanding of the complaint, any information that the resident has given about what they're looking for to resolve the situation. And at that point, asking the resident to clarify that is correct and that understanding. Now, it doesn't have to be in writing. I'm sure many of you will do this face-to-face or by phone and get that agreement early. But we'd encourage you, if there is a resident who perhaps isn't engaging in the way that is the most sort of helpful to move their complaints forward, it's quite often helpful to have that in writing. If the resident doesn't come back with that information, so not providing information or not providing that, you can explain that and say, we've given you X amount of time to provide this information, you haven't done, we're therefore going to proceed on our understanding of that complaint and provide the response to those instances or to that information. The same at stage 2. So at stage 2, if somebody was to say, I'm not happy with stage 2, but I don't want to tell you why, or I can't explain why, is that you would be able to then acknowledge it and say, we're now going to review the previous definition of the complaint, confirm whether that was that stage 1 was appropriate and it answered all of those questions and it's the right answer, and we're going to proceed on that basis, so that you can then take those forward. I would always encourage landlords in their final responses to set out, in order for us to investigate further, we would need X, Y, and Z. We gave you this time and you were unable to do so. Alongside that, though, I would also encourage landlords to think about why somebody isn't engaging, and to see whether there is a root cause. It could be that there's a reasonable adjustment that's needed. It could be that there's an opportunity to rebuild that relationship. I know that might sound overly hopeful, but there are always times that these can be opportunities to kind of dig into those reasons and why that trust has broken down. So just be mindful of that as well. It is an opportunity. Thanks, Maria.
Are we okay for another question, Verity? Is that okay?
Yes, I
Brilliant.
will happily take one more.
Okay, so Claire from Aldrum Homes has put, where or how do we submit our self-assessment, as we're unable to currently find this information on the website, and is publishing our self-assessment on our own website as per the guidance sufficient once it has been agreed by the board and submitted to the Housing Ombudsman, or do we need to share it in another way or place?
Yep, so first question about the submissions of the self-assessment, that is going to be an electronic form. We are going to publish it on our website, but for full honesty and transparency, I don't want to publish that information until we are in a position ready with my team, set up so that we are able to do those assessments as they come in. So we won't be releasing that electronic form probably until mid-April at the earliest. It gives us time to make sure that as landlords are submitting them, that we are in a position to provide those responses. Our priority at the moment is supporting landlords to be compliant and complete those self-assessments. So if you are ahead of the game, gold sticker for being so ahead of the game, but please just bear with us. We will make sure that you are informed when those when the electronic form is on there. It's probably worth saying as well as when you're doing that form, we're not going to be asking landlords to copy and paste all of the information from their self-assessment. We will be asking for links to those documents. We'll be providing, that's what we're going to be looking for, but also confirming that they do comply with those different provisions of the code. That guidance is coming. So please just bear with us, and we will get that for you there. In terms of the second part of the question, yeah, publishing the information on your own website, that is the minimum or our expectation for landlords. If you are, if you choose to do anything that is different, so depending on your organisation, you may want to do a town hall event, or you may want to do a residents meeting. I don't know, everyone's different arrangements, different sizes and organisations, then we would absolutely encourage you to do so, and we'd be really interested to hear about those opportunities or the activities that landlords are doing as an opportunity to share really good practice. I think I worked at a very large landlord, we wouldn't have been able to hold town halls because that would have been just everything that we did all of the time. I think one of the huge benefits to having the code and to having this consistent submissions from all of these different organisations is to be able to pick up those opportunities. So small organisations who are very much closer or able to meet with their residents or have very different operating models, I am absolutely sure that there's a whole host of ideas and a whole host of things that you are all doing which we should be sharing, and that is an opportunity to do that. So if you are doing those things, love to hear about it, and then we'll amplify it. So please do tell us when you're doing those.
Thanks, Verity. The question underneath is quite similar, so I'm going to skip to the next one if that's okay, because I think you've answered that one. So if a complaint was logged in the last financial year when we had 3 stages, and the escalation to stage 3 is after the 1st of April, do we allow stage 3 as the complaints as the process for complaints started under the old policy, or go by the new 2-stage process?
Yeah, absolutely. We've had this question. We'll make sure it's covered in our frequently asked questions. I know that this will be something that comes up. So this will be for individual organisations to decide on. If you, I think the majority of organisations that I've spoken with and that I've spoken to will be keeping all of for all complaints received prior to the 1st of April 2024, they will keep on their old policy. So in that instance that you're talking about here, they could then go on to stage 3, and they would then progress through to the Ombudsman at stage 3 because their complaint was on the old policy. There are a small number of landlords who've asked if they can move all of their complaints onto the new policy, because actually for consistency and for efficiencies, they want to move everyone onto their new policy. And yes, absolutely, landlords are welcome to do that. But what we would expect is that you'll be writing to the resident to say, you made your complaint under our old policy, it has since changed, we will now be progressing under our new policy, and these are the reasons for us to do so, so that they are aware how their complaint is going to be handled. I think that's all the questions, isn't it, from our pre-submitted, and almost perfect timing, because I can't see anyone that has a raised hand, so I will sort of look to wrap us up a couple of minutes early if that's okay with everyone that's in the room. We have shared our email address, so you can see that's compliance@housing-ombudsman.org.uk. Landlords are very welcome to contact us and let us know if there are any particular queries that you might have, or any concerns about compliance with the complaint handling code. We're not anticipating receiving any submissions before really the end of June, because of the timings of individual landlords' year ends, and we will be receiving those during the year. We will be continuously reviewing and updating the information that is on our website. I'd really urge you, if you haven't already, to sign up to our newsletter. We will be issuing a specific newsletter once we have all of our information on the website. Please do look out for our e-learning that I believe, and we're going to look at Anthea now, that we're looking to get that CPD assessed, aren't we, Anthea, so that you as
right, yeah.
professionals, you can demonstrate. Thank you. So you can demonstrate that. I know that we're very much in the finalising space for that, and if there is anything that you are not sure on, then hopefully that will answer those questions. We'll be continuing to run webinars. I think at the end of this, Anthea will be sharing a link for some feedback on these. Please do share that feedback. Please be open and honest. We want these to be helpful, to be useful, and beneficial to yourselves as landlords, because while we have a duty to monitor to compliance, we are intending to use that to support landlords to deliver the services they aim to. So that is the work that we are doing. Just going to double check nothing else has come in. Yeah, oh, there we go. Yes, absolutely, we will make sure that you get those slides, and as with all of our webinars for the code, we will be publishing this recording, so that if you need to refer back, or if you have any colleagues that you want to review it, it will be all there on our website. So I hope that has been useful. Thank you so much for all of your questions, and for joining us this afternoon. And I look forward to seeing everyone's self-assessments as they come in. So take care and have a really lovely Thursday afternoon.
Thank you, Verity.
I'll say bye. Bye.